The New York City Football Club, big fans of Inter Miami, big fans of Nashville, at least for this weekend. That and more on NYCFC Views.
Turn up your volume. Because you're about to listen to The Sick Podcast. NYCFC Views.
Collins approaches the shot, and New York City wins the first MLS Cup on their first try, and they're going crazy. Tiene el tiro y gol! Gol! New York City es el campeón de Major League Soccer.
The sickest New York City FC podcast. It's gonna be sick.
And for New York City FC to have another chance at an MLS Cup, a lot's got to happen this weekend. But it can happen for those who have faith. But it'll start with a New York City victory at Citi Field against Chicago Fire. I'm Glenn Crooks, the English radio commentator for New York City. There's Roberto Abramowitz. He does it on the Spanish side. And Roberto, I'm at the training facility today. I'm sorry you're a little under the weather and had to stay home. Hope you're feeling better. You look great. So
thank you. At least that. It's better to look good than feel good, I heard, or something like that.
We have important things to discuss here, but there was an important event in my life in the last week. I'm a celestial kind of guy, Roberto. If you don't know that, you might not know that. You know, we've known each other for a while. And I went to visit my daughter in Albuquerque, and there was something called an annular solar eclipse. For those not familiar with it, that's not a total solar eclipse, but it's where the moon gets in between the sun and us. And this creates a ring of fire. You have to watch it through the special glasses or you'll go blind, or something will happen to your vision. So everybody was looking up at this thing, and it ran right through Albuquerque. Its path was right through New Mexico. So it was like one of the best spots in the world to see this thing. And I got to do it with my daughter, and it was a very special moment because there's a spiritual nature to this kind of stuff. It didn't go completely black, but the colors were really odd. It got really cold. We were at about 10,000 feet. And I just thought I'd share that because it's helped me take the next step here and also provide more positive vibes for New York City FC, which they got last night. Could have been different, right?
It could have been, and it almost was. I mean, that game was a little bit crazy with all the opportunities that were there on both sides. Miami had some issues on defense. Kamal Miller was having all sorts of problems. I don't know what's going on with him. I remember him being like a really solid defender in Montreal, and in Miami, he's been having his issues. I mean, he's like a starting center back for the Canadian national team. But I don't know, lately he's been doing some things that are head scratching. And and he almost gifted away the game. Meanwhile, on the other end, Miami had all sorts of chances. Good to see Jordi Alba back for Inter Miami. And as far as we know, Messi will play against Charlotte on Saturday. So good news for Inter Miami. And New York City needs a result there. We were always under the impression that Charlotte could only get 1 point. Turns out, looks like that they can get 2 points, but that's it. New York City needs to win, and then everybody starts rooting for Nashville against the Red Bulls.
Yeah,
and then
so that's
against Montreal whenever the playoffs start.
Right, 9-8, and Montreal, with all those results occurring, would lock into the number 8 spot. I talked to James Sands today. He talked about playing at FC Cincinnati, so he needed to maybe focus more on that 9-8 game. And but he's looking ahead. He's very confident they're going to get in and then get through that first game. It would be interesting to go back to Montreal, where New York City had that great success last year. Wilfred Nancy was the coach, 3-1 win for New York City to get to the East Final. And then now it's Hernan Losada as Montreal. They certainly haven't had the same sort of season, but and they're not 100% in the playoffs yet either. So they need things to go their way too. So the setup completely is Red Bulls lose to Nashville. Charlotte either ties or loses at home to Inter Miami, and New York City gets 3 points and beats the Chicago Fire. Right? Have that right?
That's it.
So I found
wish it was win and you're in, but
I know.
no, it's not.
Well, the DC United result was massively disappointing. That was before the break, and that's long forgotten now, and it's on to Citi Field and Chicago. So got a chance to speak to Nick Cushing and James Sands. I thought the most interesting part of both conversations, because it's the obvious question you ask somebody about last night's game. Because last night's game, Charlotte at Miami, New York City if Charlotte won, New York City's done. Now we're at this training facility today. If Charlotte wins that game, and it's a completely different vibe, it would have to be. And
of course.
But then a late goal, and have you seen all the late goals that Charlotte has conceded to, and the number of points? And we're going to show this graphic in a moment, a tweet from Tom Boger. Don't put it up yet, because I wanted to just tell you that neither Nick Cushing nor James Sands watched the game last night. They James kind of just said, I can't, it's too tense, it's too stressful. He watched a movie, and Nick sat with his wife and also watched a movie, and he had his 13-year-old son watching the game, and I guess at the end of the game, his 13-year-old son made his way into the room, and he could just read it on his face that they got the result necessary. Nick did say he watched it up until the penalty that was taken away due to a VAR. It was a handball called against Kamal Miller that was reversed properly. It hit his chest. And so, but isn't that something that, I mean, I'd be watching a game, stressful or not, man. I mean, but they did not. That's interesting.
It is. I mean, everybody has their own way of doing it. There's no right way or wrong way. It's just an individual choice, and I leave it at that. And whatever works for them is fine.
Now, the other side of it is coming up this weekend on Decision Day. You'd be interested in, everybody's going to be interested in tracking what's going on in the other two games, the Red Bulls at Nashville and Charlotte hosting Inter Miami. The players, so Sandy Rodriguez and James Sands both said there's not a chance they'll want to know the result. Although Sands said, I'm sure if we need a goal and there's 15 or 10 minutes left, somebody will shout out, yeah, the Red Bulls are losing, just to try to, give them that extra edge.
I don't get that. I mean, I don't get any of that, to be honest. I mean, I'm with them that they shouldn't be paying attention to the results because they can't control anything else. The only thing that they can control is winning. And they have to win. No matter what, they have to win. If they don't win, they're not in. So there's nothing there. There's no speculation. Well, a tie could help us, so let's sit back.
You're right.
You want to win, and that's it. That's the only thing you got to do. So you win, and then you look up, and then you find out if the other results went your way.
No, you're 100% right. I thought of that too, but there's still reasons that you might just want to see what's going on. It could be from a motivational
what
standpoint.
are the reasons? I'm really curious. What are the reasons when the only thing that you can control is winning? Why would you want to know? How could that benefit you?
Yeah, no, it's a question I probably should have asked along the way. But Nick Cushing said he'd have one of his assistants keeping track of those other two games. And so just there must be something in there that we don't know. To me, it could only come from a motivational standpoint. Yes, you need to win, but if just listen to me. Just listen to me. I know that, but if you see that the other two games, this is psychological now. We're going to go to the mental component. If you see that the other two games are going your way and it's 0-0 and there's 10 minutes left, that could be a little extra juice to get that goal. You need it anyway, but now it's like, wow, everything's going our way. Don't shake your head. That's the psychology.
I disagree. I just totally disagree with that. If you're not motivated enough to win and you need that extra push, you weren't prepared properly.
We've already talked about this.
Sorry, it doesn't.
How many NFL games are there, Roberto? How many NFL? Let's go to NFL. How many games a year? 17, right? How many?
17.
Then there's 365 days a year, and I would say 3 or 4 out of that 17 games, every team says the same thing after the game. Yeah, we weren't quite with it today. We didn't give it our all today. And it's like, it's part of the psychology of sport. If I'm out there and it's
game, Glenn.
Pardon?
It's a playoff game. If you're not sufficiently motivated to win a game that you must win to stay alive,
I don't know what you're
saying.
saying.
Need something extra to push you, something is wrong with your mental preparation. I'm
It's
sorry.
not.
I feel very strongly about this. This
Oh,
isn't
you're
the
wrong.
first time something like this has come up, and I've been an advocate for this for a long, long time. This isn't the first time that I've heard this. You should not need any extra aside from the fact that you know that you need to win, and there's nothing else out there, and that's it. And if you
Well, you
need
don't.
extra motivation, you weren't prepared.
Right, and you
I'm
don't
sorry, you just
understand.
weren't.
You don't understand the psychology of sport. You don't
I don't get.
understand.
I do say I do understand. I
No, you
understand
don't.
psychology pretty well too. And to
Okay.
me, it's mind-boggling that something else would push you more. Like if you weren't motivated to win enough, and then somebody gets into a fight with you, and then all of a sudden that's something extra. Then something's wrong with your preparation. There should be absolutely nothing that can push you more than you're already pushed for an event like this. There isn't. And if you're not prepared. I'm sorry. You can't change my mind on this.
Good.
Don't
And
even try. Move on.
okay, we will move on. And you don't get it. I don't know.
I do get it.
No, you don't.
100% I get it.
Yeah. Okay. Well, if it's 0-0 and the other two games are going well, I'm shouting out to James Sands and Santi Rodriguez. Let's go, guys. Let's keep it going. Everything's on our side. Let's go. I'm going to do that, and we're going to move on to the next thing, which is what? Let's see
I
that
don't think
graph.
they can hear you from. By the way, we're 100 yards away from the field. They're not hearing you.
Let's see that graph from Tom Bogert, because I think this is interesting because we've talked about the 3 times that New York City has lost late leads. I think it's Atlanta, Columbus, and I'm forgetting the third one. It just happened recently where games ended in draws.
Miami.
Miami. So this was interesting about Charlotte because there were some graphics up there last night that were really astonishing. One of them was that with Messi, Inter Miami is 11-1-2, and without him, they're 1-4-2. That's not in this graphic, but that's why everybody in New York City land wants Messi on the field on Saturday. That's for sure.
But that again also is there's a lot more to that because I mean, for instance, Alba didn't start playing again until yesterday. Last night they still got a tie, although they were missing Kramarski, who was playing with the U.S. U23s, who blew out Japan 4-1. There's a lot more players that came in. Aviles came in. So there's a lot more players aside from Messi. But yes, obviously he makes a huge difference.
Yeah, well,
there's a little bit of context that was missing to that stat.
Plus, Joseph Martinez will be back from international duty also. So let's say Campana starts, then you can bring Martinez off the bench.
Campana had a good game last night.
Pardon?
Campana had a good game last night. He was really active. He was busy in the box. He was creating opportunities. Robinson came in as a sub, and I mean, he played really well out wide and then got the goal. Nice little play to get, to deflect that in front for the goal. And then they were close to getting a winner. God, that would have really helped New York City. As it turns out, it really wouldn't have made a difference now that I think of it.
Not
but
really.
It would have been maybe at that point, I thought it would. But now that we've seen the revised standings and everything, it wouldn't have made a difference. 2 ties works just as well as a tie and a loss.
Maybe that's the psychology of the standings. All right.
They just can't win.
Huh?
Yeah, that's all. Charlotte can. If any other result from a Charlotte win is good for New York City, and then you got to remember that the Red Bulls have made the playoffs. What is it? 12 years in a row now.
13.
Or 13 in a row.
They're trying to make it 14. Yeah, they're trying to
make it 14 against Nashville, who hasn't been fantastic at home. Haven't been bad. Haven't been fantastic, and we'll see what happens.
Well, the Red Bulls need to lose for New York City, but that kind of game has 0-0 written all over it. Those two teams have struggled, but Nashville's got Hani Mukhtar, man. So hopefully he can dazzle a little bit, and Nashville helps out New York City FC. Chicago. So I don't know if you saw Frank Klopas, his comments from yesterday, Roberto. Klopas is the interim manager. The last time New York City played Chicago was way back in March, and Ezra Hendrickson was the coach. He ended up getting sacked. Frank Klopas, one of his assistants, took over Klopas's pretty much a Chicago Fire legend at this point. But he said, so you know how the stadium, what do you think about playing in a baseball stadium? What do you think about, so he was asked that at per normal by the local reporters up there in Chicago. And I loved his answer. He said, oh, I think it's really exciting. This is paraphrasing. I think it's really exciting. I remember when I used to play at Wrigley Field for the Chicago Sting, and it was really cool. There were over 30,000 people. It was at Wrigley, and it was really a neat atmosphere. So he turned it around and he didn't like say,
Love
this is, you know.
Love it.
So it was nice
I went to see
somebody.
the Cosmos, and I went to see the Cosmos and the Chicago Sting a couple of times, and once was in Wrigley, and the other game was in the old Comiskey. And they were both really fun games, and the atmosphere was fantastic. Yeah, so let's hope that the atmosphere is fantastic at Citi Field this Saturday, and the rain stays away.
Yeah, what's the latest for it? I know it's supposed to rain tomorrow because I'm supposed to golf tomorrow, of course, so it's going to rain and I probably won't play. But more importantly, what's the forecast for Saturday, Roberto? It is raining.
It's supposed to be rain, but I don't know exactly the times, and that always shifts. So hopefully we'll get a dry game in, for the fans' sake.
I don't want to bring it up in terms of trying to create any negative vibe, but I went back and watched the highlights of the last Chicago match because I could hardly remember the result or anything. And it was, first of all, it was Gabby Pedetta finishing, and what a wonderful finish. I don't know if you remember, he slotted it past Spencer Ritchie. Ritchie was in goal. Chris Brady was not. He was away. So then the equalizer was the Kai Kamara left all by himself at the back post on a set piece. And then he just headed the ball across the face of goal. Then it got knocked out and then got ripped home by Fabian Herbers. And but it kind of brings you back and is almost symbolic of what the issues have been all year long. Not enough goals and conceding bad goals, and
conceding them late. Well, I think that goal was like in the 70-something minute, I believe.
Yeah, it wasn't at the brink like some of these other goals have been, like stoppage time goals, like against Miami. But
the thing was that they had seemed to have all the issues with set pieces resolved, and then all of a sudden it reared its ugly head again.
Yeah,
and that's really disappointing.
It is, and then the disappointing DC result when you're in pretty good form going into that game, right? 6 unbeaten, 3 wins, 3 draws. You go to DC.
That's I was just going to say that game was mind-boggling to me. Because with everything to play for and to come out with that performance, and I know Nick today in the press conference was talking about chances created and all that, and that they had more, and it was 5-3 and that, but that game never gave the sensation that New York was on the front foot and that New York was, it was an unlucky result. It was an unlucky result. They were outplayed, especially in the first half.
First half, well, he did, he did say the first half was really disappointing that they, and there's another example. So, Roberto, how do you explain that? There is no explanation. I mean, people could say, oh, Nick Cushing didn't have the team prepared. The staff didn't have the team prepared. It's not the players have to provide the motivation in getting up for a game where if you win that game and you win Saturday, you're in. And it is mind-boggling. And it's hard to explain, but it comes from the psychology of sport. I'm not just saying that because we talked about it earlier. There are a lot of things that are difficult to explain in athletics, and not just athletics. Psychology works in all these different ways that have impacted, anybody watching in both of our lives outside of sport. But I'm telling you that it's very difficult to explain. And that example I gave early on about how it would, you might get just a little bit more of a jolt knowing, and you're in the 80th minute when you're starting to drag a little bit because you've put all that effort in during the course of the game. And where do you get that next little jolt from? And maybe that's what it is. That's what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about a team that might not be prepared to give their best. But how do you explain DC United?
Right.
Because the team did not give its best.
The difference being between DC United, the DC United game, and this game against Chicago is margin for error. So with the DC United game, as little as a margin of error is, and the fact that they lost and they're still alive, there's still a margin for error. On Saturday afternoon, there's no margin for error. So they must win. That part sort of boggles my mind. Obviously, DC United had the same interest at New York City. For them, it was a do or die game because they didn't have that was their 34th game of the season. So they didn't have a margin for error. They needed to win the game more so than New York City did. And I always hate when people say, well, the other team wanted it more, because that sort of attacks the professionalism of a lot of the players there. And I really don't buy into that very often. But God, it made me think about it. It really made me think about it during that game, because I couldn't understand while I'm watching this how they're getting. I mean, it wasn't totally dominated, but dominating enough where, they allowed a goal in the first half and they allowed a goal at the beginning of the second half. And it just should have never have happened. I mean, and I'm wondering also, as I'm looking at that game, how is it that the Red Bulls can score 5 goals there and New York City couldn't get 1, right? And this is without Christian Benteke. Christian Benteke is not in the game. He's not even dressed. And you're thinking, wow, huge advantage for New York City. How many of us weren't looking at this going, wow, New York City got really lucky? And you really thought Hurtado was going to be the difference in the game?
No, quite the opposite. Quite the opposite. But do you think the players? Look, I asked this directly of Nick Cushing. I said, "Is there?" And I said, I don't hate, but I mean, I've used the word psychology here quite often. But I said, was there any psychological component that might have led to a first half where it wasn't as sharp and as motivated, I guess you could say, as you would expect? And this is, look, if they prepared for Benteke, 14 goals, a bull in the box, very difficult to defend. The expectation was Benteke's playing and we are prepared. But Nick also said, well, we also prepared for Messi, even though he didn't play, and we thought we played pretty well there. But he did admit to the fact that, that could have some sort of an impact because Benteke doesn't show up. You have a little bit of you just kind of, almost a sigh of relief that I don't have to play this 6'3" monster, in front of goal. Now it's Eric Hurtado, who is not prolific, has a pretty limited history of scoring goals, and he had a pretty good first half, man. I mean, he was motivated, and
he was active.
Yeah. So I think there's a part of that, I think, that kind of played into how that first half went. I really do. That's my feeling.
Yeah, it's just hard to explain. I mean, New York City, we understand, has had all sorts of issues on the road. There's a lot of games that they should have won that wound up in ties. There's a lot of games that they lost that could have been ties. And there's reasons why they only have 1 victory all year away.
Yeah.
Thankfully for New York City, they're closing it home.
Sammy, put that graphic up from Tom Bogert one more time, because we really didn't get into it. And I just want to, from Charlotte's standpoint, Roberto, we've talked about Christian Lattanzio. We're both fond of him. He was a former assistant here under Patrick Vieira, now the head coach at Charlotte. But my goodness, how do you sleep at night? 25 points dropped from a winning position during the course of the year. Can you imagine how they're thinking? Similar to how Nick Cushing in New York City are thinking about those 3 late goals that ended up in draws and you drop 6 points there. You could just get 2 of those back. That's 4. You get 1 of them back and you're probly sitting pretty. So imagine what Christian is thinking here.
The difference is that Charlotte is basically starting 2 very young center backs, right? And now this is going to probably pay off for them in the future, but it's definitely not paying off for them in the present. And when you're allowing, and you're dropping 25 points from winning positions, and your goal differential after the 84th minute is -7, there's a lack of composure at the end of games that winds up costing you.
It's crazy. And the thing that you think about those late points dropped and goals conceded. I mean, they were the thing I would say, and you can take that down now, Sammy. I'm sick of looking at Tom. Thank you. And
oh, stop.
Oh,
He's
stop.
got a better mustache than you, and you're jealous.
I'm not jealous, but he's got a good one. The I forget what I was going to say. I actually it completely dropped off how I was going to approach this one. But he's got the two young center backs you talked about. Let's see, Latanzio. I can't remember, and that's the other thing that Tom Bogert has over me. He's a lot younger.
Yes, he is.
and thoughts don't just escape his brain, like that. So it's a four-way race for the last two positions in the Eastern Conference, and at least, Roberto, we can do our broadcasts, and decision day is meaningful. We can look at the other games and see how they're going, and make sure that our public, those that are listening to us, can understand the situation, from start to finish. So that's going to be. It is going to be entertaining and fun for us to call this one, I'm sure.
And it's going to be a little bit nerve-wracking, right? Because you want these guys to do well. You want the team to make the playoffs. You root for the guys individually. You root for Nick because he's such a good guy. And, you just want to see him well. You want to see him happy. So, you hope that they get, that the best happens and they're able to get into the playoffs. And at that point, it's a new season.
All right, Roberto. Well, that's it for New York City at Chicago and some of the other things we had to talk about. So let's kick it around. Messi meets America, except the U.S. Open Cup. Roberto, I don't know if you're aware of this, but
yes, I am.
Apple TV has produced Messi Meets America. Now, the most dramatic Messi moment is his very first game. He scores a game winner off of a free kick. No one will question that. But I think one of the more thrilling, and the League's Cup final, but one of the more thrilling Messi moments to me, and it was just such a great game, was the 3-3 draw with FC Cincinnati in the U.S. Open Cup semifinals. Messi had 2 assists, and he converted his penalty, and Miami advanced to the final of the U.S. Open Cup. But Apple didn't have rights to those games. Don Garber earlier in the year just smashed the U.S. Open Cup with his comments regarding how he didn't want MLS really connected with the U.S. Open Cup. Again, I'm paraphrasing, but that's basically what he was saying. And then you do a documentary and you don't include this, what turned to be a very important part of the story. I don't know what you thought of it, but I haven't started to watch it yet, and I want to talk a little bit about Beckham because I've watched the first 2 episodes of that. But I don't know, man. At first I was like, come on, man. And I'm still kind of like that, but I don't get it.
I'm 100% come on, man. You can't. You can't decide to whitewash history like that. I mean, it was part of history, and he lost. The team lost. And it happens. And even if you don't have the rights, and maybe you could show photos and you can talk to people about it. And you can't just say, well, it didn't happen. It's very disappointing, without a doubt. It takes something away from the documentary. By not doing anything with that, it takes something away from the documentary. The fact that's what we're talking about just shows that it's not good. Not good.
Well, I want to read Garber's quote. He's the commissioner of MLS, and I want to read Bob Fosse's quote. He's the MLS Players Association executive director, very important a guy for the players. So here's the Garber quote. I would say that they're not games, talking about U.S. Open Cup, that we would want our product to be shown to a large audience. So frankly, I'm not all that disappointed that the audience is small. It was responding to who was watching these games. So I appreciate the enthusiasm about it, but we need to get better with the U.S. Open Cup. It's just not the proper reflection of what soccer in America at the professional level needs to be. What?
But that wasn't for that. That was way back when he said that.
It was way back when, but it's relevant to the fact that it's not in this documentary, right? Because MLS and Apple are married. They're a married couple.
Yeah, so they're only going to present the positive sides.
So
it's not an independent documentary.
It's not the positive side. It was very positive.
It is.
No, it's wrong. wrong. That he lost the final, that has nothing to do with the fact that it's omitted from the documentary. Come on, Roberto.
No. That part I'm not saying, but it's
okay.
Because you show losses, right, as motivation factors. I mean, everything. They always celebrate in documentaries how you get up from adversity, and so adversity is always good.
Yeah,
if
but how many
everything
minutes?
is just positive puff pieces all the way through, it doesn't have that same.
Yeah.
It doesn't have that same thing. And
how many minutes?
But by leaving this out, they've done a disservice.
Yeah. How many minutes did Messi play in the final? 0.
I don't remember right now.
He was injured. He didn't play. So it's almost
okay.
Like, without him, they couldn't get it done. And and that was the only loss. 11-1-2 with 11-1-2 with Messi, 1-4-2 without Messi. So that's one of the 4 defeats. Okay, and Bob Foss, excuse me, I said Fossey. It's Foose. Bob Foose, MLS Players Association. We haven't taken a formal position on the cup. I will say my personal opinion is that it's not at the level that our players should be playing at. I know the league has worked a lot with the federation and tried to be respectful of what they're trying to do, but I can tell you that the U.S. Open Cup is certainly not something that our players look forward to.
So here's my answer to that.
Yeah.
Go to England and say, hey, the FA Cup isn't worth it. Then try to come back.
Is this not the oldest standing competition, soccer competition in the United States of America?
Yes. It is the oldest trophy. It's the oldest sporting trophy in America.
And it's a pub. I always love that a pub team can get in and maybe knock off a USL League One team or something, whatever it might be. Or a USL League One team. The big issue has
always been with the US Open is that, at least in my opinion, is that US Soccer, which owns the US Cup, right, the US Open Cup, hasn't ever really put in a lot of resources behind it. And therefore it goes, without, already coverage of MLS and of soccer in this country is pretty poor compared to everything else. And then now you add this in and, the coverage is even poorer. So, TV ratings aren't all that great. And instead of celebrating this cup, they're doing quite the opposite. And it's disappointing. I would like to see it elevated.
Very disappointing. And it seemed like the cup was making strides in terms of its publicity well, we'll see what happens. That's it for the Messi meets America.
But you're right, Glenn, and that's a really good point. And the fact that Messi was in it was a reason why the TV rights were bought up in English and in Spanish. Telemundo, who was the other one? CBS, right? Paramount. And
CBS, yeah.
And then even in Argentina, Torneo y Competencias, TYC, they bought him as well. I mean, it became really important because Messi was going to play in it.
Yeah. Wow. Interesting stuff, Roberto. The Beckham documentary, you should watch it. I mean, I like David Beckham. I'm a big Beckham fan.
You too.
Because I think it goes beyond the glitz, which there's a lot of that. And the documentary focuses a lot on his relationship with Victoria, Posh Spice, which I'm not a Spice Girls guy. I don't really know their stuff, but I knew they were huge. I'm not. I don't. What are you talking about? You don't know me very well then. You don't know me very well. I can't name one song and I can't name one other Spice Girl other than Posh Spice because she's.
You don't know
David
Baby?
Beckham.
How dare you?
No, I don't. But anyway, so what? But Roberto, I'd like your take on this too. So episode 2, I think, is a must-see for everybody. If you have the opportunity, it's on Netflix. It's not Apple, it's Netflix. And it focuses on Beckham getting booted, red-carded in the semifinal against Argentina, the 1998 World Cup. We were trying to kind of recall that last time, which year that was. And you should really watch it because what I don't remember, and I know I do remember I was at LIU Brooklyn starting a women's soccer program there and spending every waking minute on, and so I just didn't, and of course I watched the World Cup, but I didn't have that I just didn't have a good feel for what Beckham went through. And maybe this shows well beyond what he went through, but it was to hear him talk about it, to hear his wife talk about it, and to hear his parents talk about the draining experience that he had that year, where he went on and assisted on both goals to win the Champions League, and then he just collapsed. I mean, it's a wonderful episode of the suffering that he went through, losing weight, just not the player, and his team. I'll tell you what, Sir Alex Ferguson and Manchester United, man, they saved this guy's life. Maybe, I mean, it's really, it's really a compelling episode, and one I'm glad I saw because I didn't really, I never recognized that he went through that much, and man, did he. It's awful what the people in England.
Yeah, I do remember. I mean, I obviously you don't know all the details and everything, but I do know that he was absolutely vilified. And but then you don't know how somebody absorbs that. We talk about fanatics in sports, and we know when you do something good, you can be tremendously celebrated. But when you do something really, really poor, then how the fans can turn on you and what effect they have on you. And you showed, in this documentary how that can happen. I mean, we see, especially in Latin America, it happens in Europe as well. Thankfully, it doesn't happen here. You have a poor game or a series of poor games for your team, and the fans are visiting you at home, and that's not a good thing. Or they're vandalizing your car, and somehow a lot of fans actually think, well, there's no pressure on players here, like that was a bad thing. It's like, yeah, well, in South America or in Europe or in Asia, we'll go to your house and we'll burn down your car and we'll threaten you, and that will make you play better. No, it doesn't. No, it doesn't. We're very lucky that sort of stuff doesn't happen here, and that type of pressure isn't right, isn't pressure. That's insanity, and that's why I specifically said fanatics and didn't say just fans. That is. Just shouldn't be happening. In Mexico, they went and a lot of players, where was it? I think it was Monterrey. When they were having a bad season last season, the fans came out and stopped all the cars and demanded, why aren't you playing better? And demanding more from the players and threatening them. That doesn't help. That's not positive. That's not going to make a player play better. But when you have that mentality that, yes, I'm making a difference because I'm threatening somebody, and that's horrific. That doesn't help in any way, shape, or form. And we hope that sort of culture doesn't ever, set foot here in America in soccer or any other sport.
Well, and it's part of how David Beckham responded and reacted to everything. He never said anything. And, he kept it, he really internalized it, which perhaps had a negative impact on him individually, but he never went after anybody. He never said anything, and I think it's such a vivid explanation of what he went through and how he handled it, which I have a lot greater. I haven't watched the third and fourth episode yet, but I have a even greater respect for him because of how he handled which was and remember our friend Patrick Vieira at Nice. Do you recall they wouldn't let the bus out of the facility to get to a game because there were the ultras who are pretty nutty in Nice. I mean, they don't have a massive support group. They don't fill that stadium for any match, but they've got some crazy ultras, and they gave that was a scary moment for Patrick and his team.
I'm sure it is. I've seen it as well. Buses being stoned. I've seen it, in Argentina. I've seen it in Mexico. I've seen it in Europe. I mean, those things aren't right. The one thing I wanted to tell you about David Beckham, I've gotten a chance to speak to him twice at random events, and I can tell you, he is just such a nice guy. And I remember I was in the middle of a conversation, and security tried to drag him off. And I had a follow-up question, and he told security to leave him alone. And he came back to me and spoke to me and finished the conversation. I mean, that is just really classy of him. And it just goes to show the type of person he is. And I wish him nothing but success. I really do. He really has earned it. He's a really good guy.
Last thing, Roberto, and I'm going to lay this one on you. because I was so taken aback. 86,000 plus at the Rose Bowl for a friendly between Chivas and Club America. It's a big rivalry, I understand, and El Clasico, but this is we talk about the Mexicans, you talk about the media oftentimes, and the Mexican fans, how unexplicably sometimes difficult they are with their national team in particular. But this is the other side of it. This is why, why Leagues Cup is such a big part of what's going on now with the MLS playing a League MX and things like that. But I saw this and I was like, oh my God. To me, that was such a statement for the fandom in Mexico, and that they would fill it like that for a friendly and fireworks. Yeah. And it was like crazy. It was crazy.
It was like a Super Bowl, right, for a friendly game. Yeah. And, the fans obviously were there, and the atmosphere was absurd. America won the game 2-0 over Chivas. So America fans were very, very happy. But we've spoken about this before. The number one team in the United States is a Mexican national team. And the number one league in the United States isn't the EPL, isn't Italy, isn't Spain. It's Mexico. It's Mexico. And that's why MLS is doing so much to associate itself with Mexico, and Mexico is doing so much to associate itself with MLS, because the amount of money that these Mexican teams can make by playing here and by being on TV here is just enormous. And so there's great synergy there, and MLS has to find a way to be better at saying, hey, it's okay for you to root for Chivas and root for America and root for Cruz Azul or whoever you want to root for. But hey, also root for our team wherever you're located, right? If you're in Houston, root for Tigres and root for, the Dynamo. If you're in LA, pick LAFC or the Galaxy and root for Chivas or Querétaro or whoever you're rooting for. You can have teams in multiple locations, just like, I, in England, for some reason, am a masochist and follow Spurs. In Mexico, I follow Necaxa. So it's not just a matter of you just have to follow one team, and which is why I've always advocated for the fact that there has to be more marketing in Hispanic, in Hispanic areas and in Spanish, and there has to be more press in Spanish and press releases and things like that, and cover it, and trying to get more coverage from Hispanics for MLS. That's why I'm always an advocate for this, because that's your biggest market in this country. And it's ready-made. It's not like you got to convert people from baseball fans or from football fans or from NBA fans or NHL fans or NFL fans to soccer fans. These people are soccer fans already. Now make them be interested in your team as well. Yeah, and that's what they've got to work on.
Converting's not going to work, but well said, Roberto. And I was paying attention, but Nick Cushing was leaving the facility, gave a wave, said, "Are you still working?" I said, "Yeah, we're working. Roberto and I are always working." But we wish Nick, his staff, and New York City FC all the best on Saturday. We'll be there to talk about it and present it, Roberto. Roberto on the Spanish side, myself on the English side, and our air times for the pregame, 5:45 this week, p.m. Eastern, 6:09. I guess we're figuring 6:09 as a kickoff. No, we haven't been told that yet. So is it 6 or 6? Yeah, so we're not sure. But just join us at 5:45, and then we'll tell you when kickoff is. Yeah.
Don't tell them about anything else. Just 5:45 and leave it at that.
That's the New York City FC
we have no idea.
NYCFC.com/radio, the NYCFC app, and the TuneIn app. I know many of you have the TuneIn app as well. We're on there also. So thanks for joining us.
Once they get there, all they have to do is hit favorite there, and then they can just go straight to the TuneIn app. That's all.
Beautiful. So we'll look forward to talking to you then. For Roberto Abramowitz, I'm Glenn Crooks on NYCFC Views.
And that's a wrap. Hope you don't miss us too much until next time. Follow the Sick Podcast NYCFC Views on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, Google Play, and Apple Podcasts.